Greetings, wayward souls. Silent figures stand sentinel at dusk. Locals call them the Dark Watchers. Tall, shadowy beings who vanish when approached, yet never seem to leave. You can light your lanterns, hold on to your wards, but the chances are they've already seen you. Colin Mallard arrived in Big Sur beneath a sky that looked both bruised and waterlogged. The kind of sky that forgets how to let go. The rental car's engine gave a final tick before silence took hold. Thick, deliberate silence, like something holding its breath. He stood at the trailhead longer than necessary, for what felt like hours. His boots planted in the gravel, eyes fixed on the ridgeline. The mountains rose in the skyline like old gravestones, jagged and indifferent. Granite shoulders hunched against the horizon, their edges softened by the dying light. The air smelled of eucalyptus and dry pine, but beneath it lingered something else, both mineral and metallic. Colin wasn't here for leisure. The hiking permit he'd obtained was a mere formality. The tent, the gear, the dehydrated meals, all props in a performance he didn't believe in. What mattered most were the sightings. Tall, motionless figures seen at twilight, always on the ridge, never close enough, and never actually confirmed. Colin had read the accounts. Spanish missionaries called them Los Vigilantes Oscuros, the Dark Watchers. John Steinbeck mentioned them in Flight, a single line about shadows that watched but never approached. His son Thomas claimed they were real. Locals didn't talk about them, or they lied. Colin didn't believe in folklore, he believed in patterns. And the pattern was clear. Sightings clustered in late October, always at dusk, and always alone. He unpacked methodically, each item placed with ritual precision. Trail cams, infrared enabled, mounted at shoulder height. A leather-bound field journal, half filled with maps and coordinates and annotated witness statements. Rosemary sprigs, dried and bound with twine, a nod more to the ritual than belief. A single obsidian shard, sharp enough to draw blood, and a copy of Flight, dog-eared at the mention of watchers. He checked his GPS. No signal as he expected. He marked his location manually, noting the elevation, the angle of the sun and the wind direction. He was meticulous, detached, but something in the air resisted measurement. The forest around him was quiet. It wasn't an absence of sound though, but the presence of something waiting. The kind of quiet that presses against your skin. He stepped onto the trail. Gravel shifted beneath his boots. The trees felt as if they were closing in, tall and narrow, like sentinels. The light thinned and the ridgeline loomed. Colin walked for hours, following the path until it frayed into deer tracks and erosion scars. He chose a clearing with a view of the ridge, high enough to see, but low enough to be unseen. He pitched his tent with practiced ease, facing west. As dusk bled across the sky, he sat outside, journal open, pen poised. He wrote, October 23rd, 1847, wind northwest, No visible movement on the ridge. Temperature dropping. I feel watched. Irrational. He paused, pen hovering above the page, before he added, Rosemary placed at perimeter. Obsidian shard buried beneath tent flap. No belief, just protocol. The sun eventually dipped below the horizon and the ridge darkened. He stared at it until his eyes blurred. Nothing moved, but the silence deepened. The second evening settled heavily like ash, and Colin sat cross-legged outside his tent, journal balanced on one knee, pen idle. The sun was bleeding out behind the ridge, casting long shadows that didn't behave. He watched the granite line above him, waiting for movements that he didn't believe in. The forest was quiet again. The kind of silence that folds around the ears and makes you doubt your own breath. He noted it. He always noted it. October 24th, 1839. No birds, no insects. Wind still. Ridge visible, no movement. He looked up and there it was. A figure. Tall, motionless, standing on the ridge just left of the highest outcrop, silhouetted against the last light. Wide-brimmed hat, a cloak or coat, hard to tell. No face, no features, just presence. Colin didn't move, he didn't blink. He counted the seconds. 30, 60, 90. The figure did not shift, did not sway, did not breathe. He reached slowly for the trail cam remote and pressed record. The screen flickered with static. He adjusted the lens, but nothing. The figure remained, but the camera saw only white noise. He stood, and the figure just vanished. It didn't walk away, it didn't fade, it was just gone, like a light switched off. Colin stared at the ridge, his heart was steady, and he wrote, Figure observed, 1841. Approximate height, 6 foot plus, no movement. Vanished upon standing. Trail cam failed. Static recorded. He walked the perimeter of his camp, and everything was as he left it, except for one thing. Near the base of a pine tree, just outside the rosemary ring, lay a small pile of stones. 5 to be exact, stacked in size order. He hadn't placed them, and they hadn't been there yesterday. He didn't touch them. Instead, he just added the final note. 5 stones stacked, no disturbance to soil, no prints, no explanation. The wind picked up and it smelled of iron and rosemary. And Colin spent the night sat outside his tent. Colin found a notebook by accident when he'd followed a deer trail off the main path, drawn by a flicker of movement he couldn't confirm. The ridge loomed above him, its granite spine casting long shadows that didn't align with the sun. He paused at a narrow outcrop where the stones split like a wound, and something glinted inside. It was a notebook. Weathered and warped. The leather cover mottled with mildew and sun-bleached streaks. He pried it loose, and the spine cracked like old bones. Latin names, elevation notes, soil pH levels. And then the handwriting changed, became erratic, desperate, written in panic. They stand where the sun dies. I left rosemary, they left silence. I buried the obsidian, but they moved closer. The author was Amara Ellison, botanist. Last entry dated November 2nd, 1993. Her final message. I walked toward them. They did not move. I did. Colin read it twice, the wind stirring in the trees, but the sound didn't reach him. He felt the pressure of the ridge behind him, like a breath held too long. He flipped to the back, and tucked between 2 pages was a charcoal sketch of 5 figures on a ridgeline. No faces, no feet, just vertical voids in human shape. And beneath them, a stack of stones, a sprig of rosemary, and a single word: appeasement. Colin didn't speak. He didn't write. He just walked back to camp with the notebook clutched to his chest like a relic. That night he placed rosemary at the perimeter again, buried the obsidian deeper, copied the stack of 5 stones, each one placed with surgical care. But again he did not sleep. Colin didn't believe in rituals, but belief had nothing to do with it. And that night he followed Mara's instructions with the precision of a surgeon. Rosemary sprigs placed at each cardinal point around his tent, each bound with twine, each pressed into the soil with the flat of his palm. He buried the obsidian shard beneath the tent flap, deeper this time, and he had copied the stack of stones exactly. 5. He didn't write, he didn't speak, he just watched. The figures didn't return. Something else did. At 2:17 a.m, Colin woke to a deafening silence. The forest was still, the wind had stopped, and even the insects had gone quiet. He stepped outside. The stones intact, rosemary untouched, but the air felt like breathing through thick fog. He opened Mara's notebook again. Her sketches had changed. He was certain of it. The stones were darker, the figures closer, and one had a hand raised. He stared at the page until his eyes blurred, and then he saw it, that beneath the sketch, faint, small and smudged, but there. They don't come for blood, they come for memory. The next night he repeated the ritual, but this time he added salt, a ring around the tent, and a line in front of the stack. He whispered Mara's final entry like a prayer. I walked towards them. They did not move. I did. And that night he finally slept and dreamed. He dreamt he was stood on the ridge. The 5 figures surrounded him, but they did not speak. But he felt them, inside his chest, behind his eyes. They were no longer watching, they were remembering. He woke with a start, with dirt under his nails and rosemary in his mouth. His journal was open and a new entry written. October 26th, 3:12 a.m, stones intact, salt line broken. Physical residue noted. Colin began the climb just before dusk. He didn't plan to. He told himself he was checking the trail cams, repositioning the western lens. But his boots found the incline without instruction, and his hands moved through the brush like they already knew the way. The air thinned as he ascended, but it wasn't from altitude. He wasn't high enough for that. And narrowing, as if the world were folding in around him, ridge by ridge, breath by breath. The sun was low when he reached the crest. The sky behind him was bruised gold, and ahead of him the land fell away into shadow. And there, on the next rise, stood 5 figures. Tall, motionless, perfectly spaced. They faced west toward the dying light. Wide-brimmed hats, cloaks that didn't move in the wind. No faces, no features, just absence shaped like men. Colin didn't call out or run. He found himself stepping forward. Each step felt submerged, as if he was walking through syrup. His ears rang, his vision narrowed, but he kept moving. 20 feet. 15. 10. The nearest figure was not a person, it was a void. Not black with colour, but with absence. A silhouette cut out from the world. The trees behind it were visible, but wrong, warped as if seen through water. The figure didn't move, but Colin felt it watching him. But not with eyes, with memories. His own. He saw flashes, his childhood bedroom, the smell of his father's coat, the sound of a woman's voice saying his name. Then nothing. His journal slipped from his hand. The pages fluttered and the ink bled. He reached out. The figure raised its hand, not in greeting and not in warning, in recognition. And then he was alone. The ridge was empty, the sun was gone, the wind returned. His journal lay open at his feet. The ink had run, but one line remained, written in his own hand. They are not watching. They are remembering. He didn't remember writing it. Colin left the mountains at dawn. He didn't pack properly. The tent was abandoned. The trail cams were left blinking into static. He carried only the botanist's notebook and his own journal, though the latter had changed. The pages were blank, not erased or torn out, just unwritten, as if the ink had never touched them, as if the thoughts had never formed. He drove in silence. The road twisted through the fog and redwood, but he didn't look back. His GPS reconnected him somewhere near Carmel. His phone buzzed with missed calls, but he ignored them. Back home, he placed Mara's notebook in a padded envelope and mailed it to a folklore archive in Santa Barbara. No note, no return address. Just the weight of it and the need to be rid of it. 3 weeks have passed and a package arrived. No sender, no markings. And inside, a charcoal sketch. 5 figures on a ridgeline. One with a hand raised. Beneath them, a stack of stones. a sprig of rosemary, a shard of obsidian, and a single word scrawled in one corner. Remember. Colin burned it. The smoke smelled different. Not like fire, but like rosemary and iron. And that night, he dreamt of the ridge again. Stood alone, the figures watched. But this time he understood. They weren't watching him. They were watching what he had forgotten. He woke with dirt under his nails and a single stone in his palm. His journal remained blank. Colin no longer speaks to the mountains. He keeps the blinds drawn. A rosemary plant on his windowsill, withered despite watering it. The obsidian shard sits on his desk untouched. His journal remains blank. Not a single word. But sometimes, when the light hits the pages just right, he sees impressions, like something pressed into the paper from beneath. Spirals, figures. He dreams often. Always the ridge, always the 5. They do not move, they do not speak. But he wakes with a taste of iron and rosemary on his tongue. He's begun to forget things now. Small things at first, names, dates, the way his mother's voice sounded when she laughed. Then larger things, whole days, whole people. He writes himself reminders on scraps of paper and pins them to the wall, but they fade or the ink bleeds and the paper yellows overnight. And one morning he found a stone stack on his kitchen floor. 5 stones. He didn't touch them. Instead, he sits and watches and waits, because he knows now. They do not chase. They do not speak. They only watch. And we, in turn, forget. And there the tale ends for now, but the echoes will always remain. If you've enjoyed your stay here in my domain, leave your mark. A review, a whisper, a 5-star sigil. Until next time, wanderers, I've been Fauna Blakewell, and you've been changed forever.